Sari Mitnick, and this is Seamwork Radio, where we tell stories about the surprising ways that sewing impacts our lives. Welcome to Seamwork Radio. This month, we're doing a special series of episodes on the theme of small business. So if you've ever thought about turning your hobby or your craft into a business, we've got a very special guest today to help you get started. Today, we're going to talk to Abby Glassenberg. Abby's the co-founder and president of Craft Industry Alliance. Craft Industry Alliance, if you're not familiar with it, is an amazing community built for professionals in the craft industry. So Abby's really seen it all when it comes to businesses in this space. She's also been through it herself as the owner of her own craft business. She's a sewing pattern designer, a teacher, and a journalist, and she's dedicated to creating an outstanding trade association for the crafts industry. In this episode, you'll learn what Abby thinks is the number one thing you should think about when you're considering turning your craft into a business. She'll share some examples of different business models and how successful craft entrepreneurs can combine them, how to know if you have a product that might be successful, and whether you should take the time to write a business plan before you start out. Abby's got a wealth of experience to share, so if you've ever thought about creating even a tiny little side business for yourself, you'll learn something from this episode. So let's get started. Hi, Abby. I'm so happy to have you on the show. So for people who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Abby Glassenberg, and I'm the co-founder and president of Craft Industry Alliance. And that is an online organization for craft and creative professionals. And that's kind of my main gig that I've been doing for the past 5.5 years or so. But I'm also a sewing pattern designer. I design dolls and toys, stuffed animals. So that's my other business, my craft-based business. And I kind of started out in the craft world with a blog as a blogger, which is called While She Naps. And I launched that back in 2005. So I've been in this crafty space for a long time now.
Yeah, you've been around for a while, huh?
Yeah.
And you've gotten to work with a lot of businesses. So I feel like you have a unique perspective because of that.
Absolutely. We have over 1,700 members of our organization. So I interact with them every day. And then I also have a podcast of my own, which I've been running for 6+ years. And so I've interviewed lots of business owners through that. And then I also do a lot of journalism for our website. We have a news section on our website, and we report on craft industry news. And so I've just reported a lot of stories for a long time, and so talk to sources for those stories. And so I definitely interact with craft-based businesses in the industry all the time.
So tell me a little bit more about the Craft Industry Alliance for people who aren't familiar with it, and kind of how you interact with your members and what you offer to your members.
Yeah, so we offer 3 things. One of them is news, which I mentioned earlier. So we really felt like there wasn't a great B2B trade magazine out there, something that was really reporting on news in the crafts industry, whereas most industries do have some kind of trade magazine that's published to talk to business owners in that niche about mergers, acquisitions, new hires, trends, basically whatever you needed to know in order to be able to run your business in a smart way. And we really wanted to take that seriously. I've always felt like craft is the microcosm of the world. And so every social, political issue that's happening out there is happening right here. And so environmental, think about it. It's really everything. So there's tons of stories. And so that's one thing that we offer is news. It's really important to me. And then the second thing we offer is education. I'm a former middle school teacher, and that's where my actual training is in teaching. And I really think offering those professional development opportunities is super important, kind of the stuff you would get if you went to the trade show and were able to attend some of those businessy classes, but just offering them online all year, accessible to everyone. So we have monthly webinars that do that, and also online courses that are based on business concepts. And then the third piece is networking. So a lot of us work, either alone or with a very small team. Lots and lots of very small businesses and crafts, micro businesses. And it can be pretty lonely and hard to meet people who are doing what you're doing, understand the issues that you are facing. And we really all face a lot of the same issues. And so being able to meet other people, talk with them, network with them is also something that we work hard on in building that community. And we have businesses of all sizes, from really big businesses in the crafts industry to very tiny ones. And we're all together in this community. So that's the third piece that we offer.
That's great. I feel like business owners can be so isolated. I think loneliness and that sense of not having anybody to talk to about your problems is such a big problem for people who own businesses, especially really small businesses, especially when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah. What do you see other business owners struggling with the most, especially these really small businesses, maybe those who are starting out or who are just intending to be small?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of things. I mean, one of them is marketing. I think that when you shift from having a hobby that you enjoy maybe in craft to having a business, you really have to wear all these different hats. And one of them, because you're a small team or a team of one, is marketing your product. And that means getting over that feeling like you're showing off. We're really socialized in society to not be a show off. And why are you, tooting your own horn all the time? Like, that's not attractive. But if you were part of a larger team, maybe working for one of the bigger companies, right, there would be a marketing person or a whole department devoted to that. And so you have to sort of put on the marketing hat and look at your product from a distance and say, well, how would I, if I was tasked with marketing this product, go out there and do that, and then go ahead and do it. So that's one piece. And then I also think that people, I know I had this problem for sure, feel like they have to be good at everything in order to have a business. And actually it was you that I first learned, I believe, had, other people on your team who did some of the tasks, like maybe photography or drawing some of the diagrams or things like that, And I think when I saw that, I don't even know when, I was like, oh, okay, so just because I am not expert in every area doesn't mean that I'm not qualified to have a business. I can, either put up some startup capital, or as profits come in, I can reinvest to improve things by hiring out some of the things that I'm not great at. And that's what other people do. Of course, that's what other people do. But for whatever reason, that can be a hard jump to make. I think because we are DIYers and we feel like, oh, we can learn and do it all ourselves. But when you do that, you really inhibit your own growth.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of business owners, but I agree with you. I think it's particularly prevalent in this space because we are such do-it-yourselfers and we like learning things and we like taking on new challenges. And so there's a real temptation to just keep doing it all yourself and maintain that control.
Yes, giving up control is really hard. But I think in the process of writing books, I've written 3 books with different publishers. And what I learned right away in that process was that when you hand your work off to another team of people, they're able to see things that you couldn't see, and they have skills that you could never replicate. And so even though sometimes it's not always a positive experience, when it is, you start to see like, okay, having these multitude of perspectives on this singular topic is going to improve the work. And so giving up control can feel hard, but it does actually improve what you're doing.
Yeah, I had a mentor who once told me that she only hires people who are better than herself at something. And that always stuck with me. I think that was for some reason, like that seems obvious, but was a very transformative thought for me.
Yeah. And I think there are people who sometimes feel threatened by that. Like, oh, you're better at this than me. And so that can feel kind of uncomfortable. But I think she was totally right, because when you build out all of those skills, you absolutely grow. So yeah, that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. So if somebody is thinking about starting a business, what do you think they should consider? What should they think about first?
Well, I think one thing that's sometimes hard is I know for myself too, like having a hobby in craft is one thing and shifting it to being a business is a whole other thing. And sometimes it can rob your joy or steal your joy because everything becomes systematized and about production, and it just really changes the way that you are approaching making. So I definitely think you should consider that. Like, just because somebody says to you, oh, I love what you're making, you should sell it on Etsy, doesn't mean you have to do that. And we all, I've had to shift what I do as a hobby as my hobby became a business because it's no longer feels relaxing. It feels like part of my work. And even though I love my work, it's no longer a hobby. So you really need to think about that. And then I think also you need to think about whether your product is marketable. And I've seen people, try to go into business and sell things that just are not ever going to lead to a productive, profitable business. It just isn't. Either the product has a very small market, so there's just not enough customers out there at all, or it takes too long to make. The supplies you're using are too expensive. There's no way to make it quickly enough, all of these things. So just because a lot of times people will say, oh, you should sell that. That is not a business. So you really need to think to yourself, is this product unique enough in the marketplace, distinctive enough that it's going to tell people right away that it's my brand's product? Is there something about it that I'm offering that's different? Can I price this product for profitability? So can I source the materials cheaply enough in order to make this a profitable product? Can I make it quickly enough? Can I make enough of them? So not that you have to scale to be a massive business, but if you are going to put in the time to dedicate to it, I think it's important to think through maybe having one-of-a-kind products for every product is not going to work because you have to take a new set of photos, write new marketing copy, and a new listing if you're selling online, for example, for every one of those. So that may be too much labor. And are you going to be able to also charge for your labor for the number of hours that you're putting in there? So, and then the final thing is like, are you really ready to wear all of those hats? So even though you can hire out, you're still going to have to do a lot of different things, especially in the beginning. You're going to still need to do writing, some photography, bookkeeping, sweeping up at the end of the day. I mean, ordering shipping supplies, sourcing, there's so many things. If you love that process and can find creativity in it, I think it's really fun, but not all aspects are going to be fun. So you have to decide, like, do I really want to dedicate my time to doing that?
Yeah. One of the things that really helped me when I was first starting out, or before I started my business, was to write out what success looks like to me. I read this in a book somewhere about writing business plans or something, but to kind of write out not just goals, but what would getting to a point of success actually look like, and what would your day-to-day actually look like. And that was really helpful to me because then when I got to that point, I could celebrate and I had, a milestone.
Yeah. And I think too, like we all work so hard and you got this opportunity and you never thought you'd get that opportunity. And then you achieve that. And then it's like, what's next? And it always feels like more and more and more. And it's like never done and never enough. And so I think that's really smart to say, well, this is a milestone I'd like to achieve. And let's take some time to acknowledge it and say, I got there, instead of being like, okay, now what? So yeah, that's smart.
Yeah. And I don't think that applies to just owning a business, right? I think we do that throughout our lives. And that's a lesson that could apply to a lot of things, even sewing or crafting.
Yeah, absolutely. And also raising kids. It's like, I have 3 children. So it's like, let's just stop right now and look. Like, I've got 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old. Like, let's appreciate this moment, and the funny things they do and say, because it's fleeting. So,
yeah. What about the different business models that you've seen in the Craft Industry Alliance, the different businesses? What advice would you give to someone trying to find the right business model for themselves?
There's probably some people out there who know right away, this is what I want to do and how I'm going to do it, and they've already decided. But I think for a lot of us, It takes some experimentation. I know it certainly did for me, and I see that happening for a lot of other people as well. Like, let's try selling this at a craft fair. Do I like doing craft fairs? Do I like standing behind the table, interacting directly with my consumers, hearing their questions, talking to them and being there for 8 hours or whatever it's going to be? I know for myself, I hated doing that, but I had to try it first in order to see that. What about, selling on Etsy? Do I enjoy that kind of interaction, that kind of customer? Do I want to sell finished goods, which I did for a long time, sold finished toys, or do I want to sell the instructions to make them? And I know, you sell instructions, and I will say, selling instructions helped me a lot. And as far as scaling my business rather than selling finished goods. So I see that with people a lot as well. If I want to teach, a lot of our members were teaching in person, traveling almost every month of the year to go to various guilds and things like that to teach. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people really, really impressively pivoted to teaching on Zoom quickly, which was incredible to see. And I have heard from many people say, I love this. I love being on Zoom and teaching people all over the world and staying at my house and not having to travel. And I've learned how to make it just as effective as teaching in person. And I love doing that. So try that and see if that might work for you or not. And if you want to make money from your content, maybe writing a tutorial or tutorials on your blog and selling ads against your blog traffic. Is that what you want to do and monetize that way? Do you want to work with brands and, be a brand influencer, a brand ambassador? There's so many different ways to go about this. And frankly, most of us do more than one. I think it's a very rare person who says, well, I only teach and that's how I make all my money. Most people teach and they publish and, they do a lot of different things. And so that's why I think experimentation is great because, without committing long term, you can try different things and then bring those strains together to say, okay, I like this one. It's like a braiding. I like this one, and this one. And those are the ones I'm going to keep and make my own. And I'm not going to do those other ones, but I respect people who do because I've tried it and I see how hard it is.
Yeah, I like that experimentation mindset. And I think it helps to kind of embrace your own personality and realize, kind of like you were saying before, you don't have to be good at everything. There are some things you're going to be more naturally drawn to and some things that you're going to be great at right off the bat and some things that are going to feel more of a struggle.
Yeah, it's like not everybody has to be a YouTuber. You know what I mean? Yet there are people who make a lot of money on YouTube. So, you don't have to try it. Should you try making a YouTube video once and see how you like it or a couple of times? Or could that be a small part of what you do? Sure, absolutely. So, I think it's worth getting out there, giving it a go, and then going forward from there with that knowledge. But I definitely think embracing your unique personality is super important here because we're talking about really building a personal brand, a brand that's based around you. And that's what people are going to like. They're going to like you. So you need to be comfortable with you.
Yeah. I think it helps to bring a spirit of fun to it and just try things and, maybe don't think about making money at first. Maybe just experiment and see if you like it at first and don't worry about the business part of it right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Have some low stake expectations and just say, I'm going to experience this and then I'll reevaluate.
Yeah, for sure. So going back to the product portion of the conversation. So how can somebody really know if they have a product that might be successful? How should they go about sussing that out?
I think a lot of it comes from listening closely to your audience and really talking with them. I have gone through periods where I've actually called people. I did a period where I called my blog readers back when I was really blogging and just asked them what they think about when they think of my blog, what they've benefited the most from, what other media are they consuming, that kind of thing. It's okay to talk to people and have that focus group. But even if you don't do that, just listening to the emails you get, the comments and DMs you're getting on Instagram, the comments you might be getting on Facebook. And as people interact, as you start to put your stuff out into the world, even if it's just through a few Instagram photos or whatever, how are people reacting to it? What questions are they asking? What are they asking for? So I worked with a business for a while who's a member of Craft Industry Alliance that were making finished products. It was a finished blanket, and people kept asking for the pattern. There was something about this design of the finished blanket that made people who were DIYers demand the pattern. And for years, the owners of this business heard that, but they were afraid to create the pattern because they felt that it would undermine their finished product sales. And when working with them, they did come to the conclusion, like, those are two different markets, and we can make the pattern for this as well as sell the finished product, because their audience was really asking for it. In every post, 5 or 6 people would say, could I have the pattern? So I think listening is really important. And I really think of it as like a push versus a pull. So a push is when your audience is asking you for something. They're pushing you and asking you for something. And then a pull is when you're asking them to like the thing that you're putting out there. So just paying that careful attention to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and whether you're pushing it or pulling it is really very helpful.
Yeah, I like that concept of push and pull. You hear this term product market fit a lot out there. Can you explain to people what that means or what it means to you?
Sure. So I think product market fit is whether your product is meeting the needs of the market. And here's some signs that you can tell that it is. So obviously, word of mouth is the most powerful marketing tool. You don't have to pay for it. You've got raving fans out there. They are telling their friends, they're posting about it on their social channels, and they love what you're doing. So that is a great way to have growth, is just people telling other people about you. And so if your product is fitting the market, they'll do that. They'll start to do that for you. They'll say, oh, you should do this. You should sign up for this. You should buy this. I just bought one. It's amazing. And they'll just tell their friends about it, and they'll sell your product for you. So that's a great sign that you have product market fit. If you start to see people doing that, they understand your product and they want to share it. So if you don't see that, if you're having a hard time, if you're doing a lot of pulling and not a lot and asking people to buy it and nobody is, then it's okay to take a step back and reevaluate and change. And I think, my business has changed and multiple times and continues to evolve. And I think you have to be okay with the fact that I may need to change this somewhat. I might need to change the pricing. I might need to change the look. I might need to bundle it with other products. I mean, there's lots of things that you can do. But again, this is really about listening to what's happening out there and then not being too precious and being able to be flexible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It's almost like a dance between your audience or your customer and yourself. And you have to be prepared to kind of shift directions every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big difference between art and business.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, when you look at like the bigger businesses out there, they do change. I mean, just thinking about, let's just say Instagram as a business, right? I mean, Instagram today doesn't look like Instagram looked when they first launched, right? And they're listening to what people are doing. They're looking at what their competitors are doing, and they're changing things and making it dynamic. And, I think that if you're not constantly sort of reevaluating and being willing to change, you're going to have a stagnant business and eventually it will become obsolete. So it's definitely something that it's always a work in progress. And again, I think that's creative. It's really creative. If you're a creative person, that can really appeal to your creativity. It's just solving all of these problems day to day.
Yeah. So kind of diving into a little bit more nitty gritty, what about sourcing for products? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, sourcing is hard. And I think when we start out, right, we often just go to a retail store and buy supplies and then make something and then sell it. You might buy yarn at Joann or something like that and knit something. And then as time goes by, you start to realize that if you calculate it out, you're not making any money at all. It really is just a hobby that's paying for itself. Again, totally fine. I think that's awesome. But if you want to have a business that's profitable and that's going to grow over time, then you do need to be able to source the raw materials at a price point that is going to make the finished product profitable. And that often means buying in bulk. It means buying wholesale. So that's a commitment. It's an outlay of cash at the front, and you're going to be saddled with, a dozen bolts of fabric or whatever it is, and that are going to live in your garage or under your bed or something. So, that's scary. So I do think it's good to try to develop a little bit of product market fit first before you jump into that and then end up with lots of wasted money and supplies you can't use. So, but once you're ready, then it's really a matter of sourcing. And people are very guarded and private about their sources. Emailing somebody who has a business that's competitive with yours and saying, "Where did you get that?" That doesn't tend to go over well. But at Craft Industry Alliance, we have developed lists of sourcing materials, places that you can go to source all kinds of things at affordable prices and ways to set up wholesale accounts. And that's one of the things that we offer our members is those lists. So that's very helpful. And then also being part of a community of people who are interested in lifting each other up is also very helpful. So we've often had people come in and say, like, I need to get, eco-friendly envelopes. Where do I go? And other people say, well, here's where I've gotten mine, that kind of thing. So being part of a network and community can be very, very helpful. And it's also just a lot of Googling, a lot of like hours spent Googling and reading and just like deep in research mode and just spending that time trying to figure out how to source something affordably. It's hard. And you want to keep your values in mind too. Like, do you want to get this from an overseas factory? And if so, what are the conditions there like? I mean, there's a lot of research that can go into this as you start to go down that road. But once you find a source for your supply, and you also may have to, by the way, work with a factory to create a mold or something like that that's specific to your product. And then finding various factories or, mills. I mean, there's so many ways to go about this. It's a relationship. And once you do have that partner in place, it can be a great long-term relationship. And they can bring ideas to you, by the way. So they may say, we've just begun doing this. Would you like to try this? So you never know. I mean, I think having those positive relationships with your suppliers can be fantastic. And also if you wholesale with your retail shops, being able to talk to those shop owners about how things are going, call them up and ask them how things are going. How is your product doing? What else are they seeing? What do they wish they had? And again, like being able to talk to people and really listen, that's how you'll learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that aspect of listening and those relationships and community, like you said, is so powerful for a business of any size.
Yeah, it is. I mean, business is built one relationship at a time. And it's a long, slow build sometimes, it can feel like very slow at times for those of us who are impatient. But building those relationships is so, so important and helping to support you through the ups and downs.
Yeah. Yeah, I am also very impatient. I've learned to be more patient. I think craft has taught me to be more patient, and having a business has taught me to be more patient.
Yeah. I mean, that's what drew me to sewing in the first place, was because if you cannot be impatient when you're sewing, because you will make a mistake and then you're going to have to unpick that whole thing and probably recut that fabric and everything else and just waste so much. So that's what I am an impatient person, and I do love sewing for that reason, because it's like you have to take your time and do it right. And that's like the best for me.
Yeah. And knitting too. When I first started knitting, I was like, wow, it takes 3 months for me to make a sweater. That's real patience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if somebody is just starting out in starting a business, do you think a business plan is necessary?
I do. I have to say, I wasn't sure, and I certainly didn't have a business plan for my sewing pattern business, but I co-founded Craft Industry Alliance with a partner, and it was her idea to create a business plan when we started. And so I went along and we did a lean startup business plan, which is really just one sheet of paper. I know people imagine business plan is going to be like 50-page document. This is just literally one sheet of paper, and it asks you some questions in different columns, and you fill them in. And some of them you're like, how am I supposed to know what my projected revenue is going to be? And these kinds of things there are a little bit of guesswork, again, a lot of Googling, but other aspects of it were incredibly helpful. One of the columns, asked you to look at all the competitors that are out there. And, again, I think we can be kind of socialized to not do that. Like, don't look at somebody else's paper. keep your eyes on your own paper. But actually in business, you do need to look at the competition. You do need to know who else is out there. What are they doing exactly? Where are they priced at? How large is their audience? Getting as much information as you can, because it really helps you to think about, well, how am I different? And as a consumer, why would I choose my business versus choosing these existing competitors that are already out there? So it really can help you to differentiate, and writing that business plan gives you that time and space to do that kind of research. It also helps you ask questions like, what problem am I trying to solve? Who is my ideal customer? Where are they hanging out? How am I going to find them? What are my costs going to be? And just, what are the costs that are recurring costs, and what are the costs that are one-time costs? And, how is that going to change over time? So just fleshing all of that out and having that space and time to do that research before you jump in, knowing that, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you may look back at this document and say, none of it actually went the way I had thought, but at least you're starting from a thoughtful place.
Yeah. Are there any other steps that you'd recommend for somebody just trying to kind of conceptualize their new business?
Yeah, I think we sort of covered it, really. I definitely think being in community is important. I also think you need to make sure you've got a distinctive enough product. I do see a lot of people who will say, well, can I start selling things based on your pattern? I get a lot of consumers who ask me that. I'd like to take your pattern and make a whole bunch of this and then sell them. And I'm like, of course you can do that. I have no problem with people doing that. But when you think about it, is that a good business? Is that product really distinctive? Is it yours? Or is somebody else already making it? So I think if you're really going to have a business that's going to thrive, you need to think about developing your own pattern and making sure that it's really yours. It's really distinctive and different. And when people see it, they immediately think of you and your brand. So that can take some work and feel frustrating, but I think it's really important to take those steps at the outset.
Yeah, I think that goes to long-term versus short-term thinking when you're just starting out. It's hard to think long-term, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it is. It is hard to think long term. I definitely struggle with that. Like, what's my 5-year plan? It's like, but it's important to do, at least to try.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, this was a wonderful conversation. What's the most important piece of advice that you'd give to somebody who's just starting out?
I would say hang in there. Honestly, I feel like perseverance has been such an important aspect of what I do. And just the longer you stick it out and keep trying and weather the difficulties that come your way and survive them and then keep going, the more established you'll become, the more people who will know about you, the more relationships that you'll have, the better you'll get at your craft, the better you'll get at assembling a team. All of those pieces come together, and it can feel so hard in the beginning. But I do think that if you're able to stick it out and stick around and keep at it, you will get better over time. Just like with anything, you will become a faster runner if you keep running. So you just need to keep going. And I definitely think the temptation to give up too soon is pretty high. So yeah, persevere.
Yeah. And I think that's another place where community can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Which is why you provide such a great service.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Abby. It's been great having you on. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much, Sari. I love talking to you.
All right. See you later.
Okay, bye.
I'm so grateful that Abby joined us today and shared all of this wisdom. So, the number one thing that I took away from this episode is really just how important community is in business and also in life. If you're interested in what the Craft Industry Alliance has to offer, Abby generously shared a discount of 20% off your membership when you use code SEAMWORK20. Just go to craftindustyalliance.com to check it out, and you can sign up there. We'll put that link in the discount code in the show notes as well. You can also find Abby at whileshenaps.com and listen to her own podcast, the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. We'll also link to those in the show notes. Thanks again to Abby for sharing with us today. If you like this episode, could you take a moment to leave us a review? You can do it on whatever podcast platform you're using right now. We'd really, really appreciate it, and it really helps other listeners to find us. Thanks, and we'll see you next week with another episode. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the Seamwork community, and you can find us at seamwork.com. If you have a story to share, send us an email at podcast@seamwork.com. We'd especially love to hear stories from those whose experiences often get left out of the conversation, whether because of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, or any other reason. Again, that's podcast@seamwork.com. You can find us on Instagram at Seamwork and Seamwork Video on YouTube. We'd love to invite you to join us at seamwork.com. We have an amazing community there, as well as new sewing patterns and classes each month for members. Podcast listeners can get 50% off our unlimited membership, which gets you unlimited downloads from our library of over 150 wardrobe-building sewing patterns. Just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find that link in the show notes. And if you like this podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast app of your choice. It really helps other people to find the show so they can hear these stories too. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with you soon. I'm Sari Mitnick, and this is Seamwork Radio.